The Curmudgeon Rock Report. Curmudgeon rhymes with bludgeon. Rock gods do it right. So do rock nerds. We're here for the rock. 1965, 2021, doesn't matter. Crude, rude, yet somehow sophisticated. Welcome. Enjoy the show.
Hello there. Welcome to the first episode of the Curmudgeon Rock Report. We hope you're as excited as we are. This is a long time coming, and we think that this will be the rock podcast that you deserve. We definitely believe it'll be better than your average. We know that everybody with a mic, or every other person with a mic, is starting a podcast these days, but we're really inspired. Think of this as a love letter and a breakup letter all in one, about rock and roll, about popular music history, about culture, and all of the things that are associated with it.
I'm getting all teary-eyed already.
Yeah, I was going to say, no shit. And so you can expect a lot of passion. No violins, we promise. We're not going to play like Modest Yavu Orchestra or any of that mid-70s.
We're not going to put you to sleep with Scott Walker music.
Yeah, exactly. One of the disagreements you'll find that we have is that I enjoy the Flaming Lips and Arturo can't stand them. So one of many, many, many disagreements in the canon of the Curmudgeon Rock Report. And so let us introduce ourselves real quick as the Curmudgeons. My name is Chris O'Connor, professionally known as Christopher O'Connor, or at least on my mom and my fiance. And on the other end is possibly my best friend in the world, probably my best friend in the world, Arturo Andrade, and also the smartest and weirdest popular music obsessive I know. We'll talk about his long, winding collection of year-by-year
compilations.
Yes, lots of compilations. Anyway, Arturo, what's on your mind? And since I've gave a soliloquy, what do you got on your mind, and what do you have to say here out of the gate?
Well, greetings from South Korea. Chris, you're out there in Houston, Texas. I live in Gwangju, South Korea. I'm an English teacher at a university, but I've been a hardcore music obsessive since, I would say, my low. Greetings from the land of the morning calm. And we hope you all enjoy this little endeavor of love on our part.
Yeah, absolutely. And what Arturo forgot to tell you is that he masturbates to BTS every night.
They are so handsome, man. They wear that makeup. They look like girls.
No, absolutely. They're a dreamboat outfit that we root for every day. And like Arturo said, I'm outside here of Houston, and my shaving regimen here under COVID has me competing with Billy Gibbons for best beard in the state. So.
To this day, that tells you how old we are, that I cannot, every time I hear BTS, the first thing I think of is Built to Spill. Sorry.
No, absolutely. It does definitely speaks to our age. And it also reminds us that for every terrible BTS, there's a wonderful BTS. So it's all good.
I'm waiting for the genius to come up with the idea to have those two collaborate.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They'll program the beats, and then Marshall gets some crazy solo going. Although, from what I've seen lately, March is pretty much serving as his own guitar tech, which has made a lot of their shows kind of horrific because he can't.
Which means Doug Marsh probably needs the money, which means he should collaborate with BTS.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was going to say, ride the coattails. So. Anyway, this is the kind of stuff that you can expect. This is born from a 27 and a half year friendship that is winding dear put the two of us in a room and you'll find yourself saying what the fuck within 5 minutes. It's just the nature of the relationship. And now we're turning it into podcast form, so it's all good. Speaking of which, the Curmudgeon Rock Report. What is this podcast, and why are we calling ourselves curmudgeons?
I can answer that question. It's very simple. What is this podcast? It's basically a platform for us to do what we've been doing since we first met as college freshmen in 1993 in Syracuse University. Just talk and debate about music. And basically, this is just recording that and putting it out there and inviting the world to chip in as well. Why are we curmudgeons? Well, I can speak for myself only that I'm very much, or curmudgeon is putting it really in a rough way, but it is kind of accurate in the sense that I have very snobbish taste in music. People who've known me for years have told me that repeatedly. I take that as a good thing in some ways because it means I'm discerning. Means you can't like everything. You can't love everything. And one of the things that makes me curmudgeonly is when I speak to people and I ask them, well, tell me what kind of music you like. And they say, oh, I like everything. That pisses me off. Come on now. Nobody likes everything. You cannot like everything. There has to be some kind of music that you don't like. No one is that beautifully, wonderfully warm-hearted and so open-hearted that they accept all genres of music into their warmth and caress. Bullshit. Everybody has stuff they dislike. Everybody has stuff they hate. And the more of a passionate music fan you are, the more you are passionate about the stuff you love, and the more you are passionate about the stuff you really dislike.
Yeah.
And I think, and curmudgeon, okay, that's good, but that's just one side of our music passion because we can also talk about the stuff that we really, really love, and we will talk about that. But none of those adjectives or words sound as cool as curmudgeon. That's why we're calling this the Curmudgeon Rock Report.
Right, exactly. And to Arturo's point, this is not intended as a hate-on fest, although we will do plenty of hating on.
Oh, I will.
Oh, yeah, me too. I have a low tolerance. I guess where in terms of music, where it comes in for me, I have a low tolerance for artists that phone it in. I have a low tolerance for just gratuitous stuff that has no point. I also am a longtime critic, and I'll actually get into that in a second, of the music industry, the music business. They look, the business, the music business as we knew it 25 years ago is basically dead, and not because of piracy or the streaming services or the democracy of the internet and all of that. No.
The incompetence and greed of the record industry.
And the short-sightedness. Yeah, they were stupid. They had a chance to settle with Napster. This has always been my theory, and it is pretty much proven because of all of the stuff.
The literature has come out since then. Yeah.
Yeah, that basically they had a chance to settle with Napster, and what would have happened is that the labels would have set up a subscription service with Napster, and basically they would have set up the Spotify model. But for it to work all at the time, 5 labels needed to be on board. And 2 or 3 of them were stupid enough to hold out and say, we're going to maintain our monopoly and the control because, we're afraid, we just, we can't trust this thing. And,
right. And also because the current business model they had at the time, okay, CDs and physical media that you go to a store and buy, it was so profitable for them. They just didn't want to let go. And that's where the greed and the short-sightedness comes in.
Yeah, the last straw for me was, and I can't even remember who the hell it was, but when it was in 1999, I went to Tower Records and there was like some album that was like 36 minutes long, and they were still charging you $19.99.
Oh God, I remember 2001 when Weezer's Green album came out. That album is 10 minutes, 10 songs long. Each song is like 2 minutes long. That's like under half an hour, and they're going to charge you $19.90 something for it.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, what you're doing
And it's a
is
shitty record except for like 3 songs.
yeah, exactly. And so what you're doing is you're paying for a bunch of nonsense waste and overhead, and which was a joke, and promotion, which was a joke because like everything else, like in manufacturing, those CDs cost probably about 75 cents to actually cut out and make in the factory. And then the digital etching process was not that expensive either. So, but anyway, the music business.
The fortunate thing about being in that era or living in that era like we did, and or people of our age or younger than us did, is that we could do something about it. We could rip and burn back then, rip and burn your own CD compilations or rip and burn whatever you want to. Back in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, a lot of artists put out vinyl records and albums that had 2 or 3 songs and a bunch of crappy filler, and they had to live with it. They couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah, but it's one of the things I've always said is that that if you have like 1 or 2 like genius 3.5-minute pop songs on a record, it pretty much you can forgive the rest of it because those lift the boats. But anyway, to get to
that's good. It's true, especially true if you have a CD where you can skip tracks. But back in the days of vinyl records, you couldn't do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, unless you trained yourself to find the groove. Basically, each groove represented the song. I mean, I learned to do that from my dad's record collection, and for what it's worth, I got to give a shout out to Dad's collection. He had shit like Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and he had Deja Vu. I mean, look, my dad was a guy who used to get drunk and like sing Irish folk songs, all that Clancy Brothers
nice
horrendousness. But he had a really cool rock, Three Dog Night and all this.
Hey, Chris, how does every Irish folk song start?
Oh, farly find farly 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 find farly. Hey, okay. Yeah,
I'll admit that I do like some of the Pogues records, but the Pogues are like they're like Irish folk filtered through punk attitude.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, the Pogues were definitely one of the more original bands, and so and they kind of fit in, and again, with the curmudgeonness, it's not really snottiness. It's so much as just we're both edgy, we're both opinionated, we both have a low tolerance for bullshit, and our worldviews are really kind of a remix of a lot of different influences. And so I actually, back in the day, and I still bring it up, 2 of my fictional character heroes are Statler and Waldorf, who were the 2 guys up in the balcony during the Muppet Show. And I used to refer to us when we crashed in an apartment in Astoria, Queens for 4 years. Which I look back on with fondness and actually a little bit of fright.
The glory years.
Yeah, but I used to refer to us as the Statler and Waldorf of Astoria, because really, I mean, we really kind of were. So anyway, so that kind of gives you a feel for the kind of stuff that we'll kind of go back and forth on. So now, okay, so here's 2 random 45-year-old guys doing ourselves a discussional podcast. Well, we got to answer a really important question. Who the hell are we? And we also have to answer a important related question. Why the hell are we here? So, Arturo, who the hell are you?
Me, I was born in Union City, New Jersey in 1975. My parents were Cuban immigrants. I have 2 much older brothers, really half brothers, because my mother was married twice. But I grew up with them because she divorced when both of those boys were really young. And then she met my dad, married him. I grew up in that household. And just for speaking from a music perspective, I grew up listening to my brother's vinyl record collections, and it really kind of informed me. I grew up listening to 1960s and 70s rock and pop. That's what I grew up with. And the counterculture element of that has pretty much informed my musical taste for the rest of my life. And my curmudgeonly aspect in my musical taste comes from the fact that I just don't like a lot. Not all, I like some, but I don't like the majority of mainstream pop music. It's just not. It just seems formulaic to me. Even the mainstream pop of the older years, the classic years of the 60s and 70s, seemed more heartfelt and more, not to say esoteric, but it felt more meaningful than a lot of the mainstream pop of now. But anyway, going back to who am I and why I'm here? Well, that's who I am. That's what I grew up with on my oldest brother's record collection. I grew up with the Beatles, the Eagles, Elton John, Billy Joel, and Rush, oddly enough. With my other brother, Leo, I grew up with the harder edge stuff, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Queen, stuff like that. And that's what informed me as a little boy growing up. As I got older, I got into other stuff on my own. But that planted the seeds of my music geekness, and which really blossomed when I was 13. I was 13 years old, and I started listening. I tried really, really, really hard to listen to modern rock radio at the time in the mid to late 1980s. And at that time, it was all just really shitty metal, really crappy hair metal, and any other kind of metal. And you would listen to like modern rock radio circa Miami, 1985 to 90. And it's just shitty metal, shitty metal, shitty metal. Oh, that's a good U2 song. Shitty metal, shitty metal, shitty metal. Oh, that's a good REM song. Oh, shitty metal, shitty metal, shitty metal. So I got to the point where I tried, man. I bought Poison's Open Up and Say Ah. I bought Iron Maiden Somewhere in Time. I just tried, man. I tried. I just couldn't. Even at that young age, my nads couldn't be pumped enough to listen to that shit. Okay. Yeah. So what I did is that on my own, I just retreated into classic rock. Man, when I was a little kid, my brothers played records that I really liked. So I just turned the dial to classic rock radio, and I just stuck there. I was stuck there for a few years. And from there, on my own, I got into The Who. On my own, I got into the Stones, blah, blah, blah. And then, come 1991, I hear Nirvana for the first time, and that just changed everything for me and changed the way I listened to music, and in an odd way kind of opened me up to other genres as well, which is really strange. But I'll get into that later on, much later in this episode. So, and why I'm here? Well, I like talking about music. I like shooting the shit. And of course, Chris, I've known for so long. There's no other person I'd rather shoot the shit about music with.
I'm very touched. It's all good. So, as far as me, it kind of resonates. A couple of things, by the way. It's funnily enough, or amusingly enough, he mentioned Rush. An old friend of mine, Brian Hyatt, just did a really great story on Pert for Rolling Stone, talking to the other guys and the family members and all of that.
That's when he died when he died last year, right?
Yeah, he died last year, and so this was like a year later, and it just was a really moving, not like remembrance type of piece. So check that out in Rolling Stone. One of the few times you'll hear us give a shout out to mainstream music media these days, which basically is just gone to heck. So anyway, who the hell am I? Arturo and I have similar backgrounds in some respects. I'm an only child. Grew up in Syracuse, New York. The son of a college professor and two nurses. So, very middle class, and, obviously a kid born in the mid 70s, there was that joke that COVID-19 didn't really affect Gen X because we were all raised by television anyway. Yeah. And so, I'm very indicative of that statement. Musical evolution, I was a big Sesame Street fan. And so I just remember, I don't know why, but my favorite song when I was 4 years old was Herb Alpert's Rise, which was a huge hit during that. My father got me the 8-track to that. I also had a Sesame Street 8-track, and then there was a couple others in there. I caught on to the Muppets when I was like 6 or 7. So that's just kind of, sweet influences. And that's how I'll talk about this in terms of the influencers on my tastes. First, I'll just mention my father. Dad had an affinity for all kinds of music. He oddly was a big fan of Billy Joel's "An Innocent Man," which was just random. Irish folk. He huge Beatles fan. I think that single, it really goes like this. I think Thriller was really the first album that I ever adored when I was 7 and 8 years old. It was two things. It was going to an inner city elementary school, and I mean, basically, Michael Jackson was God during that period. But also, like, my dad just kind of endorsed it, and he loved that album too, and so we would play it all the time on vinyl in my house. Then, when I was in seventh grade, he bought me as a Christmas gift the Beatles 1962, 66, and 67, 70 greatest hits albums. I suspect if you're listening to this podcast, you also love those albums and you also consider them seminal. And I just, for a year, listened to those every day, and just, it was magic. I didn't understand anything about instruments. I didn't understand anything about the studio and all that, but it was just for a 12-year-old kid, lonely kid with a vivid imagination. It was magic. And then from there, I went through a period between the ages of 14 and like 18 where I watched MTV a whole lot. And it was really two things. It was the Headbangers Ball, and it was 120 minutes. And so, like Arturo, I caught the Nirvana bug. But before that, I caught a Queensryche bug. That was kind of of all things, I know. First CD I ever had, for what it's worth, is Hotel California, like everybody else, and the White Album. So, I mean, I didn't start all that unique, but I went through this period where I was into all the sort of prog metal, like pop prog metal, but also the Seattle stuff. And then it segued into, I just had this obsessiveness in high school. And again, Ricky Rockman and Kurt Loder and all that, they need a shout out too. So, the Led Zeppelin box set, the Pink Floyd box set, there was a period where I was huge into Blood Sugar Sex Magic, the Black Crowes Southern Harmony and Musical Companion, which I know Arturo and I count that as one of our favorite records of all time, or it's certainly in the top 5% of it.
It is, in my opinion, one of the 5 greatest Southern rock albums of all time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I will step on the grave of Ronnie Van Zant and say that.
Yeah, and there's times when we diverge. That's not one of them. And then from there, I would say I got into college, and the next influencer is the other guy on this podcast, Arturo Andrade.
And taking from there, when we met in the fall semester of 1993, by that point, I had modernized my taste in music. I was barely. I had already listened to all the classic rock I ever wanted to listen to, and by then I was really, Nirvana kind of was the gateway for me to, like, at the time, modern rock, what would now be called the alternative and indie. But it also kind of served as a bridge to the past, to the punk. The whole post-punk era that really was the gap between classic rock and the modern rock that I was listening to at the time.
Oh, absolutely. And I had the same experience. So, I was a huge fan of those grunge bands, and it was, strangely enough, it's like, you listen to the new and hot stuff and it turns you on to the really great stuff. And
that had me go back to the Sex Pistols, had me go back to the Ramones, had me go back to Talking Heads, oddly enough. The Clash I didn't get into until I was in college. No, I wasn't, like, later in college. Through our mutual friend Bob, he got me into the Clash. But at this point, I was still, like, bridging between classic and modern rock. And it was then when we met that I'm a bit ashamed of it now, knowing what the surviving members of Skynyrd are like now, right-wing radical meatheads that they are. But I was a fan of those early Lynyrd Skynyrd records.
Oh, yeah, just brilliant. I mean, just those first 3 or 4 Skynyrd records. I know you're not as big a fan of that last one, the 77 record, but I thought it was all great. They're one of the more underrated bands in history, which, interestingly enough, here's the thing. I get to college, and I meet Arturo, and at the time he's working at the dining hall in the dorm, and so he's wearing his hat, and he's got a Hendrix pin on the left and a Zeppelin pin on the right side of his hat, and I'm like,
I was such a socially awkward
oh
douche
yeah,
back then.
oh yeah, I jokingly refer to this as a rock nerd podcast. There's a reason, because we're nerds.
Yeah.
Uh, and so that immediately was intriguing. And then there was like this one day after a Spanish class where I was going over to the record store to just check things out, and Arturo kind of followed me like a puppy, and we just kind of struck up the friendship from that. And so kind of speaking to the randomness of how some of this might go, let me back up a second. Without Nirvana, I don't discover the Meat Puppets. I don't discover Bowie.
Without Nirvana, I don't discover about 20 to 30 bands and artists that I really
Sonic Youth is part of that. Without Pearl Jam, I never get to the Who.
Right. Or Neil Young.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, without them, and Arturo will tell you, I mean, Neil Young is my favorite. I mean, I have like 30 of his records. I mean, he's incredible. So for me, it was a journey. So I think that connection with Arturo kind of started it. It was he got me into Skinner, and I got him into Zappa. And you can't deny that it started with Zappa, and then we kind of both got into Fish at about the same time, which is one of those 25 years later, it's kind of like being in an AA meeting. It's like, my name is Chris, and I used to be a Fish.
It really is.
Yeah, kind of like.
Objectively, I will say, Fish was really good until the late 90s and early noughts. And after that, they started to really suck.
Oh, yeah. Lawn Boy is on the short list of one of the greatest badly produced records of all time. Again, so, Arturo turned me on to a lot of this stuff. And then, I kept getting deeper into it. And, I was starting a newspaper career as a journalist. In a former life, I was a newspaper guy. And I decided that I wanted to try, what the heck, why not try writing about music? So I answered an ad, an editor and publisher, and it turned out that it was what had become of Addicted to Noise, which a lot of you will probably remember was the second or third e-zine on the internet and was really awesome. But they had been bought out by an outfit called SonicNet, and SonicNet answered this ad. So I get this like fluke opportunity to go work with all these veterans that were working for the San Francisco Chronicle and the Rolling Stone and all of this. And so I kind of fluke into this. And so when I'm 23, there's Matty Karras, there's Chris Nelson, there's Brian Hyatt, there's Michael Goldberg, there is Richard Gere. Yes, his name was Richard Gere, but it's spelled G-E-H-R.
No gerbils?
Huh?
No gerbils, this one?
No gerbil. No, there was no gerbil in this guy's ass. But I had all these like great mentors and great writers and great editors around me, and it really just started a journey. And it got to the point where I was like buying Dennis Brown records and just obscure Turkish stuff from the 70s and David Axelrod. And coincidentally, if nobody out there has actually heard, there was an Axelrod record, which I believe is just eponymous, that DJ Shadow and a couple other people did some remixes of. It was old acetates from the 60s, but it's fascinating because it gets the DJ Shadow drum treatment. And so I went through all that. So those folks really influenced me. And then lately, there have just been a few folks, it just in the last 15 years or so, that friends of mine and folks that I've met that are big into metal or old country and hip hop and these things and connections. Social media has been a big influence on me too. The funniest part of my journey is that at 12 years old, I bought Appetite for Destruction just because, like Artie said, we were trying to fit in, and it scared the living hell out of me because I had never heard F-bombs and the inside. You remember this, Arturo? The inside art to Appetite for Destruction. Yeah,
the woman got raped and
exactly. Yeah. And so I was all scared. But then in my mid-20s,
that sure has aged well now.
Yeah, that sure has aged well now. Yeah, exactly. I've had the epiphany that that's a great record, and so in my the majority of the rock I listen to now is like all this speed metal, old 70s kind of like proto metal, and just all this like kind of over the top metal kind of stuff. And actually the other day I was listening to Super Unknown for the first time in a while, the Soundgarden record. So yeah, which is just awesome. And which is funny because, there were songs on there that I didn't much care for as a kid that I actually am now like huge fans of, like Fresh Tendrils is one of those. So yeah, so again, it's kind of all over the place, and
it's kind of over the place for me as well. And this is when when you first moved to New York is exactly the time, more or less exactly the time when I first moved to New York City. And this was fall of '98. You went in there because of your job. I went in there for graduate school at NYU, New York University, to get my master's degree in publishing. And eventually, we got our apartment in Astoria, Queens. This was about in February 1999. And we lived there together until, I guess, 02, 03, around there. 02, end of 02.
Yeah, when I made the dumbest mistake of my life and moved to Phoenix. Although coincidentally, a couple of big influences, Jimmy McGahern and Serene Dominic and a few other writers out there really had a nice influence on me too. So I got to give a shout out to my guys from out there. I was the music editor for the Alt Weekly out there for a little bit, but it was personally, it was kind of a disaster. But anyway,
the New York years were really good bonding experience, as not just as friends but as music fans as well. We would have our weekend trips. We just go out to the city and go to all the record shops, go to other music.
Oh yeah,
late, great other music. I would buy so many obscure, weird underground stuff from there. That's what got me into Serge Gainsbourg.
And then that kind of stuff, Os Mutantes, and
I got into some weird exotic stuff that I still love to this day.
Yeah,
we saw some great shows. We saw Slater Kinney. We saw Tool at the Garden. We saw Bruce Springsteen at the Garden. To this day, the most disappointing rock concert I've ever been to.
You at the Springsteen show?
Yeah.
Yeah,
you hear all these stories, the legend of Springsteen's 4-hour marathon shows. No, it's just really like 2 hours of performance, and the other 2 hours are him just, preaching to the crowd. Come on, everybody, sing with the feelings. Shut the fuck up and sing Thunder Road already.
Yeah, exactly. Although, to be fair, that was also when he was like debuting like 41 Shots and Land of Hopes and Dreams and that kind of stuff. But and look, I think the best show we probably saw, my favorite show during that period that we saw together was Wilco at Irving Plaza.
I saw during my time in New York, I saw Wilco 4 times, twice in New York and twice in Boston.
Yeah,
with our mutual friend Bob. And
then, of course, through my job, I had some weird experiences that he didn't get to enjoy. My favorite one of these is Cool Keith at the Wetlands, right before the Wetlands closed. And so what happened was that Keith, I don't know where the hell he was or what he was doing, but he didn't hit the stage until 2:30. But he comes out, and this was during when he was advertising his worst record by far, Black Elvis. But the Black Elvis shtick was a wax wig with an Ottawa Senators jersey and like a gold lame cape. But he comes out dressed like that, and it's just this fucking awesome banging show. And it's the most memorable part of that is this: he invites all the gals in the crowd to come up with to the stage, and he does Blue Flowers and what is it, Girl, I Just Want to Touch You, or Girl, I Want to Feel You.
Those classics from like the Dr. Octagon ecology stuff.
He's doing this Dr. Octagon stuff. And there was this one gal up there who leaves the stage, and she's got like the big afro and the hoop earrings and the kind of the leather, the 70s leather couch looking jacket with the tight jeans and the big boots with tassels on them. And Keith goes, "Hey, yo, that's the original Black Lady." And it just was Keith, like he's one of my favorite. Like Doctor Doom is in my top 10 all-time favorite.
I love the story of that you told me of Cool Keith, that he got this this small record company wanted to sign him, and he signed him, and they gave him the advance for his recording deal, and he spent it all on porn.
Yep, he spent his entire first advance on pornography. So this is another reason why we love rock so much, because it's got so many crazy, weird, interesting people in it. So,
that's basically our evolution as rock connoisseurs, is basically that. And it ran through our New York years. Chris moved out to Arizona, then moved back out east to get his law degree in New York, and now is in Houston. And I became an expat, moving to the Czech Republic. Yeah. And, moved to the Czech Republic for a year, South Korea for a few, Chile for another. Now back to South Korea, and I've been here ever since. And ever since then, I still passionately follow music. I subscribe to Mojo magazine. I have done so since 2002, and it's frankly the only music media that I read. I don't really follow Pitchfork or Drowned in Sound or Consequence in Sound, because I don't have to. Because Mojo is better writing than all of them, and B, they cover more music, better writing, and they cover. Mojo magazine covers every genre of music everywhere in the world.
They do it very well, and
they do it. It's a one-stop shop. They have really great veteran writers who used to write for Rolling Stone and Spin and Cream and Zigzag. Both British and American writers.
Yeah, the place left for serious writers, basically.
And that's where I get all my music info, and I'm not ashamed to admit that that's the only music media that I really read, and the only one that I really need, because it is by far the best one, and it's turned me on to so much music that I just can't. It's overwhelming sometimes how much I have to actually listen to in a month. To this point, it's more than just passion. It's also kind of a job. So if it's going to feel like a job, I might as well do something productive. And this podcast is a big part of that.
Yeah, and this is our effort to compete. For your attention, because look, if this is what you call turning 60-minute bullshit sessions into product and art. I'll leave you with one quick excerpt and story, and then we'll kind of get on with the rest of the episode here.
Get on with our worldview.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to get to our worldview next as curmudgeons, but one of the best years of my life was 2002, when we were still in Astoria together. And the funny part is basically I had the most successful year of my life, but never got off unemployment, because I was getting in with, all the folks from The Voice. We went to a party at Chuck Eddy's house. Chuck, if you're listening, hello, with all these big shots. And the highlight of that night is I made my way into Chuck's kitchen and found his sake and decided to drink half the bottle of it like an asshole. But anyway, it was fun. But basically that summer, he was also unemployed, Arturo. And so basically what we would do is like sleep all day, get up, have some libations, some legal and some illegal.
And that was the stoniest year of my life.
Yeah, pretty much. Mine too. And we would watch the World Cup and like listen to Sonic Youth and Built to Spill and
Weezer.
And Weezer, which he hated until he got into his libations phase, and all of a sudden, hey, they were pretty good. And so it was just like the streak of just like hanging out, just.
Now I know why it's called the Green Album, man.
Yeah, pretty much. And this is when we came up with what Arturo lovingly calls the green test, which is actually a real thing. Which
it is.
Well, actually, you know what? We probably should dedicate an episode entirely to the notion of the green test,
Oh,
then,
dude, about a quarter of my music collection is thanks to Green Test.
yeah, and actually, that's a concept. And tune in for this: the top 10 Green Test albums of all time, as determined by the Curmudgeons. So, anyway, so that's enough about us. The Curmudgeon Rock Report isn't actually brought to you by Zencastr, but it would probably suck a whole lot more if we didn't use this excellent podcasting service. Arturo lives in South Korea. Chris lives in Texas. We needed audio recording software that could record both of our voices natively, securely, cleanly, and professionally. We wanted to avoid Zoom like we would avoid Ed Sheeran. Zencastr made that possible. With Zencastr, we each use one track to capture our vocals through our computers. Then we upload the individual tracks into Zencastr's built-in post-production engine. Finally, we export the combined, smooth track out to finish editing each episode. Zencastr works awesomely well for recording your interviews with guests too. So visit Zencastr.com now and start doing your remote audio way better today. So now we're going to get into the crux in the second half of this episode, and we're going to start giving you something that you can really chew on. And hey, we encourage you to hit us up and get a dialogue going here. You can reach us at curmudgeonrock@gmail.com. That's spelled like it sounds. And then we're also on Twitter at curmudgeonpod, spelled like it sounds. You can engage with us on both of those. And we're also going to have a Medium site pretty soon. So we're going to be out there. So if now you understand why we're doing what we're doing and you understand who we are, now every curmudgeon in this rock nerd space has to have a worldview, right? It's kind of like,
and because it is rock and roll, and the number of the beast is 666, we got 6 rock points.
Yes, we do. 666, baby. That was good. And so, exactly. So, this idea, it's kind of like, like Dungeons and Dragon podcasts, that's all about worldview, and that's what makes them so entertaining. But this is okay. So the worldview according to the curmudgeons. And so we have 6 points that we've come up with to cover. And again, we'd love your feedback on these. But this is kind of, if you take these points, this really captures our feelings about rock and roll, about the current situation here in 2021, about the evolutionary relationship, how, the aging of rock, the evolution, devolution, the re-evolution, and where things stand now, and all of that. So let me get started. Point 1, a loss of communal experience does not need to equal the end of the art form. Perhaps y'all have noticed that we're running out of young bands that can fill a stadium. The last time I checked, we needed to get like Jay-Z and Beyonce and a couple other rappers to get to Yankee Stadium level.
More importantly, like in terms of rock music, there are no contemporary bands that can do stadiums. Like the youngest rock group that can play a stadium is the Foo Fighters and Green Day. And those guys are classic rock at this point.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe and that's arguable. Dave Matthews can probably still do it, and that's classic rock. And then, see, this is the reason why we're never going to completely get rid of the Rolling Stones and the U2s and these old man bands that we're going to rag on quite a bit through our curmudgeonly path.
But we still love their early stuff.
Yes, we do. We still love the first couple of decades before they went to shit. But so here we are, and we're to the point where there's not really that. It's hard to be lazy and be a rock fan now, but there's still the love for the art form. There's still the appreciation, and it's really one of these things where I mean, I hate to be cliche here, but Neil Young had it right. Rock and roll can never die. And I mean, this has sort of become real in a sense of, okay, here we are, we're aging, and we grew up with all this, and we learned about the scene, and we are children of the 20th century. The old joke is that if you have a 1, in front of your birth date. You never have to worry about getting denied alcohol ever again. But look, we're recording this on Monday, January 18th. On the morning of the 17th, Phil Spector died. Now, say what you want about Phil Spector, the human being, and the convicted murderer, but as a icon, as a figurehead, as a producer, as a visionary, as a promoter of rock and roll, he is definitely one of the forefathers of the genre, at least for white folks finding their way onto radio and kind of defining everything that came before it. I mean, really, you can make the argument that without the Wall of Sound stuff, Motown might not have caught on the way it did. I mean, that's arguably arguable, but very arguably arguable. But you could make a connection. You'll find, by the way, that I do this more than Arturo. I make these random connections and all of this. But and then also earlier, like a few months back, Little Richard died. And so these guys were in their 80s. And so the pioneers of rock and roll are dropping dead. And then even, this applies to the later guys too. Eddie Van Halen just died. Like we said, Neil Peart died last year. And so all of these icons that we grew up with are now starting to literally fade away and literally starting to die. But the stuff ages well. The stuff is still in the canon. We still get solace from it. We still are informed by it. There's a lot of those things that truly are timeless and are like Orson Welles movies, where you listen to the albums or you listen to the songs and they're never the same thing twice. And so, it's just a really strange era to be this age and to see, Paul McCartney and Bob Dylan and Jagger, like when those guys dies, it's going to be kind of like Gandhi dying.
I know, it's going to be a worldwide mourning.
Yeah, absolutely. So your thoughts on that, Arturo?
Well, yeah, I mean, and jumping off from that, I mean, you're talking about, the old stuff, the old immortal, timeless stuff. The second point to the curmudgeon worldview, it has to do with modern contemporary music. Basically, the premise is this. There's more good music than ever before. I don't know about more. There's just as much good music as ever before. You just have to work harder than ever to find it. And that's because of the way we consume music nowadays. Everything is now on the internet. Everything is either downloaded and streamed. And everything is everywhere at the same time. And it's mass media saturation. And a lot of people just don't know where to go. They don't know what websites to go to. And there's so many websites devoted to music, so many podcasts devoted to music. And we're contributing to that now. You just have to know where and how to do it. My way of doing it, and I don't recommend this to anyone, but my way of doing it is just finding one reliable source and stick with it. Okay, and in my case, it's Mojo Magazine, the world's greatest music magazine. And anyone who's a serious hardcore music geek, that should be your Bible to not just learn about older music, but learn about new music as well. So it is possible. And the reason we make this the curmudgeonly second point is to make an anti-curmudgeon point. It's very easy to be cynical, like a lot of people our age and our generation and older saying, oh, new music sucks. There's no good music anymore. No, there is. There's a lot of good music. It's just harder to find because of the death of the record label industry, where everything was fed to you on a platter. And you had venues like MTV and rock radio or hip hop radio, whatever kind of radio, where you can hear it. Oh, this sounds good. Let me see the video on MTV. Oh, this looks good. Okay, let me go buy the CD. Well, we don't have that anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
What we have is social media and YouTube. And social media and YouTube are so international at this point. YouTube is MTV now, basically. And it's so international, and we're so flooded and saturated with information, we don't know really where to go. And there are places to go. You just have to find out and work hard to find them. And that's the key issue. You got to work hard. If you're a real music fan, you got to work hard to find the good music. harder than you had to back in the days when in corporate media and when the music business was much more corporatized and everything was fed to you on a spoon.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah, exactly. And I don't mean to cut you off there, but it's that's one of our missions. Actually, is we work hard so you don't have to. And so that's kind of one of the things. So if we can point you to in the right directions, we will. Here's a surprising point to that, and this is kind of what you were talking about. It's not just work hard. So you're talking about social media as kind of a conduit. YouTube. YouTube actually right now is more reliable than like Pirate Bay and torrents and all that kind of. And it's just simpler. But the amazing thing is, and I've been learning this over the last few months, is that TikTok is driving a lot of musical tastes that break out, and it's almost by fluke that somebody
TikTok just made Fleetwood Mac a shitload of money.
Yeah, exactly. And you guys probably all know this story that there's this dude that worked at a factory in Idaho who used to skateboard to work, or one of these guys who would get on his skateboard and grab onto the back of a truck and and roller work that way. But he somehow made a video of himself drinking ocean spray and lip syncing.
Riding a scooter? Was it riding a scooter?
No, he was riding a skateboard, as far as I know.
Okay.
And he basically lip syncs to Fleetwood Mac's Dreams for like 45 seconds while sipping on cranberry juice. Well, a couple of days later, this started to kind of spread. Mick Fleetwood joined TikTok for the sole purpose of mimicking this video, and then from there, the thing exploded, and Dreams ends up back on in the top 10 on Billboard. And this dude in Idaho was able to pay for a $350,000 house in cash. And so this is like modern music distribution at its finest. But even so, I mean, look, there's stuff that's getting on the charts where like some 15-year-old kid decides to make like a goofy dance video to like some song or some electronic song, and it blows up viral. And then all of a sudden that track that they used on some whatever, dance mix record or hip hop album becomes a huge hit. So again, as far as the stuff that breaks out, you never know. And so even, to Arturo's point, not only the mojos and the word of mouth and the clubs and YouTube and all that, you also have to pay attention to the TikToks and all that. So you have to kind of pay attention to the happy accidents and be ready to pounce on them when they happen. So
thank you, China.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, China. Thank you, Korea, for that matter. The K-pop thing is big.
That's gonna be a future episode for our show for sure about what the hell is up with K-pop.
Yeah, exactly. And
I live here, and I do like Korean music, but I tend to like more of the older stuff, the pre-K-pop Korean music that seemed to have a beating heart and soul, not like modern K-pop, which is like robot music for zombies to dance to. But that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, and it's strange because it's like, neither of Arturo and I will confess, I don't understand K-pop at all. I mean, like, what the hell is this? And so it's really Arturo's mission to find like a 27-year-old gal there in Korea to come on the show and just kind of explain this to us. It's like, what the hell?
Doesn't have to be a girl. The guys are into it too. It's all over.
Okay. Well, but that actually would be kind of more interesting because, to me, male K-pop fans are kind of like bronies that I have a hard time wrapping my head around.
They're hipster douchebags who like K-pop, ironically.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like the Pabst Blue Ribbon of the 2020s, I guess. But who go figure. So, and really, this kind of brings us to another point that I'll let Arturo share that you have to work harder. But the thing is that
it's still there. There.
It's still there, but it's weird. It's wider than ever, but it's smaller than ever.
Yes.
And that gets to our third point.
Yeah, quantitatively, there are more rock bands out there than ever before. But as far as access to them and the exposure they get is more limited than ever before. And that's basically because rock has gone the way of jazz, let's face it. It's no longer at the zeitgeist of popular culture. not even in the US, not even in the UK, really. It's because you don't hear rock music on BBC One anymore. Rock music is now a niche genre, just like jazz. However, it's still, unlike other genres that sold their soul really early, i.e. hip hop. Rock, generally speaking, is still counterculture. It is still like to be rock and roll is still to be a bit anti-establishment, and it still has that stigma to it. But in the way I see it, it's a positive stigma. I don't want to be part of commercial mainstream culture, even though I know I'm saying this while we're doing a podcast, but still, I don't want to be part of those lame motherfuckers. I don't want to be like that. I only cut my hair short because my hair is really gray and I suffer from seborrheic dermatitis. I got to keep my hair short. If not, I would grow long as hell and I would never grow a beard. Fuck those hipster douchebags. So when you're listening, if you're still listening to rock music, and a lot of what counts as indie rock is not really rock. It's just indie pop or retro 80s synth pop. So that's another thing that pisses me off, that we'll get to that during the course of this podcast as the episodes go on. But rock is one of the few genres that has still maintained its anti-establishment tag to it. Unless you're talking about, the Nickelback derived shit that you hear in, conservative red state rock radio, but I don't acknowledge that. I'm talking about real rock. Real rock.
Might count. Hey, that. But
anyway, so that's point number 3.
Neil Young once said, "Hey, hey, my, rock and roll will never die." While that may be true, there are certainly some bands and artists whose careers should. The next 3 episodes of the Curmudgeon Rock Report will comprise the Bovine Trilogy, the first of which will find Chris and I each take a curmudgeonly shit on 5 of some of rock music's most sacred cows. Listen for some hot take carnage and imagine some highfalutin British music journalists' heads exploding next week on the Curmudgeon Rock Report.
Now, we were just talking about this, you've got this large swath of music that you have to work hard to find. And, rock is a niche and a counterculture. So there's still a lot of cool stuff out there. And you can still be a rebel by wearing, I don't know. I mean, you've got about 50 rock t-shirts at this point, like wear a Zappa t-shirt. I mean, I just bought a Prince Symbol t-shirt, so you can still do that kind of stuff. But it leads to another point too, that, sometimes too much of a good thing is not necessarily the best thing.
Yeah, I've had this discussion many times with other music fans, even the ones of our generation. And this is something that I've noticed, and even reading Mojo, man, I love Mojo. But one thing I've noticed about reading Mojo magazine, the 2 complaints. I only have 2 complaints about Mojo. Number 1, they give hip hop way too much short thrift. They give way more focus on folk music than hip hop, which I think is unfortunate because, I like that song by Cracker. What the world needs now is another folk singer. Like I need a hole in my head. Okay.
Yeah.
We need less, oversensitive, idiots with lame white people with acoustic guitars talking about lost love. We need more hip hop like Run the Jewels. All right. Stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, that's my first complaint about hip hop, about Mojo. They don't do as much hip hop focus as they should. And number 2, they give way, way, way too many 4-star reviews of music. Not everything can be a classic, okay? Yeah. There needs to be more discernment, I think, in Mojo. And to extrapolate from that, it just makes me think about how much fucking music there is out there. Oh my God. I understand that the fall of the end of the record label industry means artists and bands have more freedom than ever before to do however they want to do, whatever they want to do, however they want to do it. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing for the band, for the artist. And I acknowledge that. That's great. Yeah. Wonderful. but you got to look at it from the music listener's perspective. Like the point is this: number 4, there is something to be said about the old label A&R man as gatekeeper, meaning that there's something to be said for quality control, and there's such a thing as being overly prolific. And there's such a thing as music listeners being overly saturated. We only have so much time to listen to so much music.
Yeah.
And I there's a part of me, I do understand from the artist's perspective, having the shackles off and letting them go out there and do what they want as much as they want. Okay, great. Hey, I love Ty Segall. As far as contemporary rock, to me, he's rock and roll Jesus. Okay,
Yeah,
that guy puts out an album a year. Sometimes he puts out 2 or 3 albums a year, but they're usually like covers albums or live recordings or collaboration. But proper Ty Segall albums is usually 1 a year. And I'm okay with that. But then you have some artists and some bands who do 2 a year, 3 a year, 3 in 2 years, 5 albums in 3 years. And he's like, dude, come on, there's only so much we can listen to. And there's such a thing as oversaturation. There's such a thing as quality control. I think it's important.
A lot of garbage,
Yeah, I mean, it's important for an artist in a band. I know some artists will hate hearing this, equating creating art with like a mass producing a consumer product. But believe it or not, they do kind of go hand in hand together.
Yeah,
and there is something to be said for quality control. Again, you have 50 songs. They can't all be good.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said. Again, there's the Clive Davises, the David Geffens, the Herb Alberts, the Ahmet Ertegans.
Yeah,
they're the ones that found all these amazing artists or Danny Goldberg and these folks. But they
groomed them, and they were filtered.
Yeah, they groomed them, they filtered them, and so there's a reason why like Nevermind is a really strong 11-track record. There's a reason. 12. Okay. See, yeah, he's going to correct me like that all the time because he's like I don't know. I'm like a poet, and he's more like a drill sergeant with this kind of stuff. But anyway, yeah, and so you get these really strong, shorter, just really, no dead space kind of records, and all the shit stays on the cutting floor because that's why they call it the cutting floor. And so, like said, and I'll let Arturo go on a rant on this one. I'll just say 2 words: Robert Pollard.
Oh boy, Robert Pollard. I like. You know what? Generally speaking, I do like Guided by Voices, but man, like, good Lord! In a recent interview with Mojo, they interviewed him, and they asked, "Wow, Robert, you write a lot of songs, man, all the time. Why do you write so much? Why do you put out 2, 3 albums a year?" And he goes, "Well, hey, I mean, if you write 100 songs, 20 of them have got to be good." And my thing is like, okay, yeah, 20 of them are good. That means the other 80% is shit.
Yeah, exactly.
don't put that out.
Yeah, exactly. It's it's kind of a rock and roll version of the 80-20 principle that, generally speaking, if you have like 100 things out there and 100 like snippets, 20 of them will probably be usable and be pretty good. Yeah, it's like you said, it is a strange phenomenon. I always used to say that I always kind of appreciated, and here's another one, for people our age, a reference. The magnetic fields, don't use your alternative word for them.
No, I don't use that anymore. I'm a refined adult now.
Okay, well, there you go. There's the magnetic field 69 love songs, which got a lot of obviously the New York critics adored that. It was either first or second in the Paz and Jop that year. My editor, Matty Karras, adored that record. I heard it, and I wanted to rename it 23 Good Love Songs. And I mean, look, the great stuff on it, like, Papa Was a Rodeo and Chicken with His Head's Cut Off and all that is just genius. And Stephen Merritt definitely has his place in the indie rock pantheon. But yeah, that was kind of a pre-version of the same kind of thing, that there's got to be an editor However, and this kind of segues into the fifth point. For that record, there was some stuff on there that obviously was bad, but it was willfully bad, and
Sure.
it was willfully dumb, which could be really charming. And so this leads to our fifth point, something that I've always just kind of said, and kind of defines half my tastes. Dumb does not necessarily equal bad.
Sure.
So
Dumb can also be clever.
yeah,
See
dumb,
the Ramones.
see who?
The Ramones.
Oh, okay, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, dumb can be clever, and look, dumb can be like brilliant too. Because think about this. Uh, James Brown's stuff from like 69 to 75. A lot of that stuff is dumb, but man, is it brilliant. You've
Yeah.
got all this wonderful improvisational, like the trombone stuff on that stuff is incredible. The arrangements are incredible. The grooves are incredible. But the stuff coming out of James Brown's mouth and and a lot of it is just like, man, this is really, really dumb. And,
Mhm.
I feel brain cells dying, like listening to James, like literally, he's got a track that is like 20 minutes long, and it's just the same groove going on. But basically, it's just him while the groove is on. He's just like having just like ridiculous conversations with all the session musicians, and
But that's funny. That's the funny part.
yeah, no, and that's what I'm saying. It's
That's
hilarious. It's hilarious. I'm not ragging on it. What I'm saying is that this is like some of the greatest dumb that's ever been done. And then you've got some classic rock stuff like ZZ Top does a lot of dumb shit, but Billy Gibbons was a genius in the sense of like one of the great dumb formulas for success of all time was taking like blues rock, speeding it up, and then using like drum sequencers and drum machines with it. And it's like the weirdest, strangest, dumbest thing, but it worked. And
Yeah.
there's a reason Eliminator was so huge because it's
Electro blues boogie.
yeah, it was a really good record, but it's just dumb. And again, I mean, these guys, I mean, like I swear, like half of those guys' songs are really about like bukkake and like kinky stuff if you really listen to it.
Yeah,
Well,
horny women and lots of whiskey and
yeah, no, absolutely. And,
there's not a lot that separated ZZ Top lyrically from AC/DC.
no, not
Except,
really.
except AC/DC had more fighting in it.
Yeah, exactly. ACDC had more fighting and more drinking. Um,
Well,
and
they're Australian,
yeah, absolutely. And, and then again, this is the thing. You appreciate it because rock and roll, I mean, like, ACDC is consistent because like, what are their two main topics? Drinking and fornicating. And so like giving the dog a bone, which and all that stuff. Now look, Back in Black is like uh that may actually be like the Axis Bold as Love of dumb records.
Yeah.
It's just a monumentally masterpiece dumb record. And
The
AC,
dog bone.
yeah, and then yeah, exactly. And then AC and look, to their credit, like the Young Brothers and Johnson realized this because they essentially made that same record every couple years for the last 40 years. I think they just released one last year. It basically was a really terrible version of Back in Black. Just big fat riffs with lyrics about drinking and fucking. So I mean, So anyway, there's a lot. Celebrate dumb. I mean, look, one of the great celebrated songs, and we were talking about this earlier. Wop baba loop bop a wop bam boom.
Do you know what Tutti Frutti actually is?
Yeah, the original version of Tutti Frutti, and yeah, we're going to get in trouble with the Tipper Gore.
Well, no, we're not, because we're not. All we're saying is what it is. Back in the old days, early 20th century, up until the mid 20th century, and Little Richard was a gay black man in the South, right? And it was Southern slang among black people for anal sex.
Yes,
that's what Tutti Frutti was.
Yeah, and in his case, gay anal sex. Like I don't know the lyrics, but my understanding is the first version of Tutti Frutti was way dirtier and way bawdier. So and so and again, and so look, I mean, genius doesn't necessarily equal like intellectual. Genius can just be like just dumb, and there's a lot of lightning in a bottle, and that's going to be another topic that kind of defines this podcast too, is this appreciation for these lightning in a bottle moments. And that kind of is what makes rock and popular music so special, is you get these kind of singular monuments, half of them to dumbness, half of them to brilliance. And so that's the thing. Dumb is not bad. So dumb is okay. If you think something's dumb, don't write it off. Give it a chance to listen to it and appreciate it. And and then that really just kind of, I think our final point is, look, I think there's an evolution, like we said. It makes you kind of do a double take when you realize that Back in Black is now a 40-year-old record. And so, and we are, in our mid 40s. This, like we said, this rock and roll journey starts when we're like 7 or 8 years old. And, look, it's been a defining thing for us. And now here we are. And now we're to the point where we remind ourselves all the time to never forget what brung you and just keep evolving with it. And, one of the things that I'm learning...
Stay true to who you are, but keep an open mind.
Yeah, stay true to who you are, but keep an open mind. Always revisit stuff and try to be fresh with it. And, I'll be in the car sometimes and I just have an instinct, you know what? I haven't heard this album in 15 years. What the heck? Let me listen to it. And then what you realize is that listening as a middle-aged adult is much different than listening during your formative years.
Case in point, I never thought I would see the day when I would admit to myself and to my friends, wow, I really like those last 2 Taylor Swift albums.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they're really good.
Yeah. And they're actually excellent records. Yeah. And again, she's evolved. And so the idea is, we hear these things because, as she's matured, she's really come up with an original voice, but it's in the traditions of the Joni Mitchells and the,
she is.
Actors. And
I'd much rather listen to her than of the, some of the other, like, I hate to put people in these categories, but unfortunately a lot of female singer-songwriters get lumped in to the female singer-songwriter movement. People like Phoebe Bridgers and Laura Marling, and I do like Laura Marling and others of her ilk. And I think listen to those last 2 Taylor Swift records, I think she's better than all of them. Who knew?
Oh no, she's way better than all of them. I mean, look. I've never been a huge fan of her.
Who knew she would become or this modern era's new Joni Mitchell?
Yeah, definitely. Nobody had a better year in music than Taylor Swift. That's unquestionably. She took that lockdown and she made these 2 terrific, sort of organic, folk rock pop records.
Confirmed her not only as a great commercially successful artist, but just a wonderful artist as well. But she actually makes great work.
But here's the thing, that she always has been a huge talent. She's always been original and and creative and all that. She co-writes all her stuff. And she's always
I thought she wrote all her stuff by herself.
Yeah, she does. She either writes it or co-writes it. This time she had some collaborators, and so it's either she does all this, but I think she became a hit in Nashville when she was 16. She started out in country. That I just didn't like her stuff.
Same here.
She was like Dashboard Confessional as a chick for quite a while, and it was a turnoff, and it was just kind of, I thought it was a little rambly, but then she had a period like a few years ago when she was doing like the deliberate poppy stuff, which was excellent, like Set It Off and that kind of stuff. And now here she is.
She learned how to edit herself.
Yeah, basically. And so there's a point, some of these artists, they get better as they get with age. I mean,
Sure.
Another one to mention there is Not a Surf, which I thought was terrible in the 90s. And then by '02 was one of the best bands in America. And now they're still doing stuff. They may be the best band in America. They're one of them. They're right up there with some of the other middle-aged bands like Drive-By Truckers and some of the other, and Jason Isbell. And
I said the best band in America right now is Lightning Bolt, but that's for another discussion.
But that's your opinion. I would say that the best guy making records in America right now is Kurt Weill. I mean, he's the best.
Yeah, I'm a big Weill fan myself.
But to the point, it's just kind of interesting that I've listened to 2 records in the last couple of months that kind of bring this point home. So Tom Petty's Wildflowers, which I really liked when it came out my sophomore year of college, I acknowledged was a terrific pop record with some really rocking stuff on it. I hear it now, and there's just an emotional thread running through the record, and there's a depth of feeling on that record and some really clever musical things going on. That album is an absolute masterpiece. And,
I agree. I think it's his greatest work.
Yeah. And what it shows me is that I wasn't ready at 19 to appreciate the fullness and depth and maturity of that record. I had to grow up myself to kind of catch up with that record. Now, at the same time, there's also the experience of listening to Outkast's Aquemini, which is a tremendous hip hop record. I would put it in as one of the top 20 hip hop records ever made still, because of its originality, artisticness, and just those 2 guys just, technically are just brilliant. But that album definitely is a child of the late 90s. It's HBCU kids in Atlanta, basically making music, smoking weed, and just kind of rambling on, and with the references and all of that, and the production. I mean, even the delta between the production of that record and then like the one they did in 2003, there was almost like sort of a charming lo-fi-ness to it, and it hasn't really aged well. It's a great record, but it's not something that I would use as a go-to anymore.
Right.
And so that's our worldview in total. If you disagree with us, or you thought that we were like rambling like crazy people, definitely reach out to us at curmudgeonrock@gmail.com, or hit us up at curmudgeonpod on Twitter, and give us feedback. So
let's wrap this up with our next 2 mini segments. And the first one will be something that I know is dear to Chris's heart. We're each going to name, if this whole first episode is about us, and we promise this will be the only episode that's going to be about us. From here on out, it's going to be about other music.
We're going to have themes. We're going to focus on the artists. We're going to focus on the world. But look, if we're going to build affinity, we got to start somewhere, right? So this is our quota.
So this one is, we're each going to put in a defining or seminal record in our lives that either changed our lives or gave direction to our lives. Chris, start with you.
Okay. I mean, for me, I mentioned it earlier, although I have to segment this into as a kid and as an adult, because like I said, it really took off when I was 23. So as a kid, it's the Beatles' greatest hits records, the Red Album, the Blue Album, and just, catching on into the brilliance of the 3 songwriters and the evolution, like listening to it from Love Me Do all the way through The Long and Winding Road, is just kind of an extraordinary evolution. And it's just this sweep that goes with it. And, basically as they get older and mature, more on drugs, or they get, basically they were able to free themselves from the confines of the mop tops and the suits and Ed Sullivan and all that, and just sort of start experimenting, and just so it's extraordinary. And that's sort of where it starts. As an adult, I can really define it very simply and very quickly. Built to Spills, Keep It Like a Secret. It's the one album that every year since 1999 I have come back to over and over and over and over again, because it's a really special, really original record of 4 to 5 minute long, accessible prog rock songs with all these odd ass time signatures, these brilliant solos, a lot of great pop lyrical concepts, and just the record is an experience. And it's one of those kaleidoscope records that every time I listen to it, and I've probably listened to it, I'm not exaggerating, probably about 2,000 times over the last 22 years, I get something new out of it every single time. And so that's how I would answer that one. How about you, Artie?
Me, well, I already mentioned this one earlier when I was 16 years old, and yeah, Nirvana's Nevermind. I know that sounds cliche for a lot of people of either Gen X or tail end of Gen X, like we are, or even people a little younger than us who caught on to Nirvana later. But yeah, no, Teen Spirit. I mean, not Teen Spirit. The album, Nevermind. That was basically what shut the door on classic rock and opened up the door to the lesser known punk alternative of the late 70s and the 80s, and then to the forward to the future. And it really did, just alter the way I change music, altered the way I listen to things, altered my expectations. And it really was the one that musically, yeah, of course, musically, because it was a force of nature, but it was also a force of nature in songwriting. And it was also a force of nature in lyricism. And thought-provoking lyricism. You actually had to have the lyric sheet in front of you, because at that young age, I wasn't sure what Kurt Cobain was singing half the time. But I eventually got around to getting the lyrics on paper. And yeah, there's a lot of themes and topics and subjects that he hit on that record. Not just the I'm so sad and lonely shit, but the whole aspect of social alienation, of feeling like a minority in your own country even, and there's a breadth of empathy there for women's rights and for gay rights, which really didn't exist in rock and roll at the time, or even before, or it did, but very few exceptions.
Yeah, it wasn't quite as pronounced from a male mainstream rock band until then.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and that was important. So on a lyrical level, on a musical level, it brought me to the Velvet Underground. It brought me to all the punk rock stuff of the 70s. It brought me to the underground, the long lost underground. Well, it's not long lost anymore, but back then it was the forgotten pioneering underground stuff of the 80s American rock, the stuff of that Michael Azerrad wrote about.
Yeah.
Bands like Husker Du and the Replacements and Sonic Youth and the Meat Puppets and Dinosaur Jr. and Nirvana really was the gateway to all of that and everything that was to come. A lot of the music that I love now, I probably wouldn't like if I hadn't had, if Kurt Cobain hadn't, trained my ear. It's like, hey, listen to this a different way. So Nirvana's Nevermind, even though I still prefer In Utero, but as far as seminal, that was as far as setting the terms for my music listening journey in life. That album was it for me, aside from the early vinyl records from my old brother's vinyl record collection.
Gotcha. Okay, and then we're going to end this episode with something that we'll do at the end of all of our episodes.
Yep.
We're going to go into our vault, which, at this point is kind of like, it's a deep trench of stuff. And we're going to pull out something from our vault and just kind of give some love to an old record, whether it's obscure or whether it's mainstream. We'll talk about that. And so, Arturo, take it away.
Yeah, my pick is an album that if you're an older music geek, born in the 50s and possibly born in the 60s. You may know who this band is. They are a duo from New York in the 1960s called Silver Apples. And they were, by today's standards, they would still be considered bold and innovative and weird and unusual. Back then, it was just otherworldly. Basically, they were a two-person group, a drummer and another guy who basically played electronic oscillators. He would have a rig of 3 or 4 electronic oscillators. He would play one with his feet using foot pedals. He would play another one with his hand with the controls, and he would play another one with his other hand, and sometimes having to use his elbows to create melodies, counter melodies, certain pulses and bass lines, and while the drummer is doing his octopus thing. And what these guys did was so revolutionary. It was really just as bold and as new and as different as anything the Velvet Underground did. And they were from the same city. And what Silver Apples did really just set the tone for a lot of what you would see in the 1970s with what the quote-unquote krautrock groups that can and I hate that word krautrock. It's offensive. But anyway, the German bands of the 70s and other electronic explorations, they really set the tone for that. They really had a big influence on what would eventually become house music. The Detroit and Chicago house in the 1980s, and going on into the 90s with the techno stuff that came out with groups, like the Orb and Chemical Brothers, who I adore, and Prodigy and stuff like that. But Silver Apples, they only had 2 albums, in 1968, Self-Titled, and 1969's Contact. But I'll go with the first album because it's the first one, right? It's the one that introduced them to the world, even though only like 10 people were listening at the time. But it's really one of the most genuinely, mind-blowingly, startlingly original works of musical art you'll ever hear. It came out in 1968. Both those guys are dead now. Simeon Cox, who was the electronic oscillator manipulator, died just last year. And that group, if you listen to it now, it sounds like it could be recorded right now. It's so innovative, so different. A lot of what we now call electronic music probably wouldn't exist without it, because the very few people who heard that album became electronic musicians themselves.
Yeah. You probably don't get like Bang on a Can and Steve Reich and a lot of that stuff without Silver Apples for sure. So yeah, definitely check out Silver Apples. I mean, that's a good call. So for my vault, I went kind of, it's interesting, Arturo said that 10 people listened to it, Silver Apples back then, and then it broke out. Well, mine, I think, was listened to by 10 people in 1982, and I think only 10 people still remember it. But it's a great album. It's the Johnson Crew, Lost in Space. And so this is the Johnson Crew, and it's spelled Jonzun Crew. Now, the story here is there was a little bit of a dance music movement briefly in 1981-82 among Black early hip hoppers and R&B guys, and like just sort of digging in the crates type producers, that they were very influenced by what was happening in Germany and in Europe as far as the experimental use of the sort of early drum machine and vocoder technology. And so the Johnson Crew is, they were in Boston, and this was what Maurice Starr did before he found New Edition and New Kids on the Block. Now, a lot of people probably remember Maurice Starr. He's very charismatic, very sort of flamboyant producer and sort of figurehead type of guy, but also just a very talented musician, because he co-wrote a lot of that stuff and was very good producer. But the Johnson Crew is this, like, basically it's like a combination of disco R&B, but it's also really great orthodox it's like credible krautrock done by black guys from Boston, with the vocoder vocals, with the great drum programming, and yeah, the concept is definitely like, we're the brothers from outer space, and so these great rhythms, and in some ways it's corny, but it's endearing, but it's so well done, and it's like only 7 or 8 songs. And what I've always found funny about it is they have a song on that, I think, called Space Cowboy. And so this is back in 1982. Well, Neil Young, like I said, who's one of my heroes, released the album Trans that same year. And he has and basically it was the same shtick. It was Neil Young discovering vocoder and sort of that sort of European technology, but he did it as Neil Young. It's a fascinating record anyway, but he has a song on it called Computer Cowboy, which is got the best riff on it, but is also by far the corniest song on it, the worst song on it. Well, Johnson Crew's Space Cowboy is the concept done way better and way more enjoyably, and is about as endearing and is about as capturing of this era and this movement as possible. And it's still, I mean, about every couple of years, I still whip out this record, and I did this recently. And, I totally recommend it. It's Johnson Crew, Lost in Space. It is on Spotify. You can I think you can find it on YouTube. If there is such a thing as an underground record store in your town, still open, you can at least ask. And chances are, like one of the comic book guy, type from The Simpsons that runs the place will know it. So there you go. Silver apples in the Johnson Crew. So that's the kind of depth you can expect from this podcast, and the kinds of left turns you can get it. So,
and we hope you enjoy our next 3 episodes. Will be part of a trilogy.
Yeah, absolutely. And in which we, for the most part, bag on really, really old people we wish would go away. And
some younger people too.
Yes. Well, and then younger as in like 55, 60. So this is going to be our Sacred Cows trilogy. And so it gives you an incentive to chime in and to listen. And again, this one was our intro worldview episode, and it's 90 minutes, but it's been a lot of fun, and we hope that you really enjoyed hopping on the vibe. Again, reach out to us, curmudgeonrock@gmail.com. Visit us on Twitter at curmudgeon pod, and we'll eventually
at curmudgeon pod.
At curmudgeon pod. And then eventually we'll be on Medium, and we'll be doing some stuff with Patreon, which we're excited about. We'll share
Absolutely.
that. We'll share that as we go along. So, hey, man, rock on, piss off.
Rock on and rock out.
Rock on, rock out, piss off. Do your own thing. Never stop being an original. And, look, you can grow old without growing stale and without growing lame. And we're definitely proof of it. So, what's that? Yeah. So we're
gracefully.
Yeah, I was going to say our balls haven't reached our knees yet. So thanks for hanging out with us, man. And
right. Thank you, and we'll talk to you guys, and we'll hope you guys will listen next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hit us up next week, and we're at all the places where you can find all the podcasts. So be well, y'all, and we'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
The Curmudgeon Rock Report will keep on rocking if you do. Catch us where you catch all the podcasts. We know you love rock and roll as much as we do. Support us with donations at patreon.com/curmudgeonrock. Find show notes and more on our Medium site. Join us next time as rock nerds smack you with knowledge. Stay rude, stay crude, stay sophisticated. Thank you for listening.